Okay, Ms. Liu, I'll begin. This regular board meeting will be conducted pursuant to the provisions of the Governor's Executive Order N2520, which suspends certain requirements of the Ralph M. Brown Act and will be conducted as a teleconference. Please use the following toll-free number and meeting ID to call into the meeting. Telephone 1-6699-009128, meeting ID 897-9760-9342, password 423632, or join on a computer. You can find the link on our website at TUSD.org. Public comment may be submitted prior to 3 p.m. on the day of board meetings by completing the appropriate submission form at www.tusd.org/BOE/board-meetings under quick links. Participants must be logged into the meeting via the Zoom link published above or by dialing in. Your Zoom participant name or phone number must match the name or phone number entered on the forms so that we may accurately identify you prior to speaking. The guidelines for public comment will be in accordance with Board Policy 2350. And any individual with a disability who requires reasonable accommodation to participate in a board meeting may request assistance by contacting my office at 310-972-6001 or via fax 972-6012. or email superintendent@tusd.org. Thank you, Ms. Liu.
Thank you, Dr. So. So right now, we just finished our closed session, item number 2, and we're here, call to order for 3. And we can go into the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Park, would you like to lead us?
Yes, please stand. Right. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all. Thank you, Ms. Park. Moving on to item number 6, adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Seconded.
Great. All motion moved and seconded.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Raise your hand and say aye.
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 I see that it's unanimous, so motion passes. There's no report of closed session actions, I believe. And we are on to number 8, staff presentation and information. Update on governor's proposed budget for 2021 to 2022. Please feel free to present now, Ms. Michelle McKay Underwood.
Well, if I may, Ms. Liu, just briefly to introduce Michelle, as you know, that for many years we've had representatives from school services come to our meetings in person. Obviously, that's not the case this year, but we also have invited members of our Legislative Action Committee to be part of tonight's meeting so that they can hear what they otherwise would have heard in person, and that is information about the governor's budget proposal that came out a couple of weeks ago. This is the beginning really of the budget cycle, and I know Michelle will get into it, where we take these numbers and utilize them as part of the second interim report that we will bring to the board at the first meeting in March, and then use as we develop the budget, waiting until the May revise when the governor makes any adjustments that have occurred through the negotiations at the legislature level here in the budget, and then present to you at that time in June, the recommended budget for adoption for the board. So it's nice to have the consistency of and expertise of school services and Michelle, who just came back a few weeks ago from maternity leave. So congratulations, Michelle.
Thank
It's
you.
nice to have you back, and glad you were able to make this meeting. So with that, I know Dr. Butler and I helped just review the presentation to make sure that there was some local information in there that really was relevant. So I think what will be presented here tonight to the board and the public will be very informative and guide us in moving forward. So Michelle.
Thank you, Tim. And let me, I see that I can share my window, so I will start that right now. I'll put us into presentation mode. Great. Can you all see that okay? Great. I'm seeing thumbs up. Thank you so much. Well, and thank you so much, Dr. Stowe, for that introduction. I enjoy coming and presenting before the Torrance board every year. Obviously, it's a little bit different this year. There's been so much that's happened in this last year, as Dr. Stowe noted, personally, also obviously in Torrance, with changes in the board and changes in your staff. And so there have been a lot of changes at the state level too. So as noted, I'll be going through the governor's budget. This is really an overview, sort of high level at this point, because there are still so many details that are yet to be released by the governor. But obviously, we want to give you the information as soon as we can, so you have that information to guide your conversations over the next several months to start to build out your budget as well. So I'm going to jump right in and just start with sort of, again, that overview that we are in such a different place now than we were when this year's budget was adopted. Not so different of a place, maybe physically, yes, but economically, a year ago, we had a $5 billion surplus. The state of California did. You may recall several education proposals, both for ongoing funding and one-time funding, because we had such a good cash and financial economic position. Obviously, that all changed within weeks of the governor's budget coming out in January. We saw really every major economic indicator just tanking. So what we've sort of done is we started in January 2020, we dipped, and that dip is what this year's state budget is built upon. And since then, we've made significant recovery in terms of finances at the state level. Of course, locally and individually, things are very different depending on local individual characteristics, but at the state level, we see a significant increase in funding available. And obviously, we specifically are interested in how that translates for education. And so next, we're going to move on to Proposition 98. So Proposition 98, for those who have been through a couple of these budget cycles, you're familiar with it. I'm not going to go into all the mechanics of the different tests, but know that proposition guides the funding minimum that the state of California must provide to both K-12 and community colleges. The vast majority of it is for K-12 education. The state can provide more than the minimum funding guarantee, but often just provides that minimum. But we see a little bit of a difference this year. So as the governor puts out his proposal in January, he is looking at 3 years worth of Proposition 98 funding levels. Obviously, we have this year's 2020, 2021 that is being corrected and updated because there are so many more revenues coming in this year than was expected when this year's budget was built. But they also look back into the prior year, 2019-20. Not as many changes need to be made as you look in the rear view mirror. And then we have looking forward. So across those 3 budget years, we see a significant increase in that Proposition 98 minimum funding guarantee. And so from that, more funds are required by our Constitution, Proposition 98, to go into education, both K-12 and community colleges. And so we see them truing up again in the current year, as well as in the past prior year. Additionally, when this year's state budget was put into place, there was an agreement that because schools were being, were really feeling the effects of the economic downturn, there was a promise made that there would be additional funds made available once the economy had recovered. And so you see that proposed in this state budget, the 2021-22 state budget, an additional one-time payment of $2.3 billion for 21-22. So this is what we're calling sort of a supplemental payment. Again, above and beyond the Proposition 98 minimum guarantee, which is pretty rare for California to do that and to have that kind of a proposal. So one of the big ways that the state addressed its funding shortfall in the current year budget was through deferrals. And for those who've been in education for a while, the term is familiar. For those who are newer to education, the idea of a deferral is that instead of actually cutting the revenues going to schools, instead they say, we'll pay you later. So we're going to continue to pay you. It's just not going to be on the schedule that you're used to, the schedule that you've planned your expenses on. And so within 1 year, $13 billion worth of deferrals were placed on K-12 schools. This was a significant cash crunch for lots of schools that had to either borrow internally or find a financial institution outside of their own district in order to make sure that they continue to have the resources to keep the lights on, to keep payroll running. It's really a way for the state to push the cash problem from the state level down to districts. So one of the things that is proposed in this year's state budget for the coming year's state budget, 2021-22, is to get rid of almost all of those deferrals. It takes cash, one-time cash payments from the state to make up for those deferrals, or otherwise they just keep happening year over year. This is one of the things that we're making sure to clarify, is that it doesn't change this budget, this academic year's deferrals. What it does is eliminates them for the next budget year, almost all of them. As you can see in this chart, $9 billion worth of the deferrals are eliminated, but still nearly $4 billion of deferrals will remain on the books. It's a small deferral from June to July, but that could still cause cash problems for local districts. And really what you see at the state level is a trade-off. It takes one-time dollars to eliminate these deferrals. So the trade-off is, do you eliminate all the deferrals or do you do some one-time programmatic things? And you'll see that the administration has struck a particular balance, and we'll talk later about the legislature and whether they would potentially make any changes to that balance. Obviously, the other big ticket item is the local control funding formula, the biggest funding stream for K-12 districts. In the current year, as you know, no cost of living adjustment, no COLA was provided. Again, in addition to the deferrals, the way for the state to manage its limited resources was to provide zero COLA on the local control funding formula. What is proposed by the governor in January for next year is to catch up on that COLA payment, not to apply one this year. There will still be no COLA applied in the current year, but next year would have what we're calling a compounded COLA to make up for the fact that no COLA was provided this year. And so that is both what is estimated as a statutory cost of living adjustment of 1.5%, as well as a catch-up COLA from this year, compounded up to that 3.84% on the local control funding formula. So that costs $2 billion, adding it into the LCFF. And because, as we know, the LCFF is a very dynamic calculation, on average, districts would see a $372 per ADA increase, but districts have very different local demographics, local ADA, and so that amount locally will change. This is a figure that it's Torrance specific. You'll see it's $339 per ADA, and that's because of Torrance's demographic population is a little bit lower in terms of those pupil factors than the statewide average. But again, on average, Torrance would expect to see a $339 per ADA increase from this compounded COLA proposal. There is, as you know, Governor Newsom has a priority of early childhood education and has really since running his election. And so we see that translated into a continued and increased focus on transitional kindergarten and expanding transitional kindergarten. So right now, transitional kindergarten is for a certain months when students turn age 5. They are allowed to enroll in transitional kindergarten. The state has recently allowed for those students who turn 5 during a different period, who are a younger cohort of transitional kindergarten, to be enrolled. So that is allowed currently, and these proposals are trying to incentivize more districts to expand their transitional kindergarten, what some folks call ETK. And so they do that through various pots of funds, either through facilities funding or through education or for some of those upfront costs to address those needs. So these are proposals. Again, we were just talking about one-time proposals versus deferrals. And so these would be one-time dollars for expanding transitional kindergarten, should a district choose to do so. One of the things also that we've seen as a governor priority is special education. He often cites his own struggles with dyslexia when presenting the state budget, and he did again on January 8th when the budget came out. We saw last year significant increases in special education funding. This year, we don't see a significant increase in base funding, but we'll talk in a second about a different special education proposal. But Torrance's local SELPA, the Southwest SELPA, under this proposal would receive a cost of living adjustment. So not that compounded COLA that we talked about, but just the statutory 1.5% COLA. It's only the local control funding formula that's proposed for that higher COLA increase. But nonetheless, if this proposal were adopted, the per ADA amount for your local SELPA would increase from $625 per ADA to $634 per ADA. So not a huge increase, but one nonetheless. We have seen several special education proposals to change how the formula works. And that has made changes over the last 2 years. As of me speaking to you this evening, there are no proposals currently from the administration to change how special education base funding is allocated. There is, however, a proposal for early intervention grants. So this would be $300 million based on preschoolers with disabilities. So just 2 years ago in the 2019-20 state budget, there were one-time dollars sent out based on preschoolers with disabilities. But prior to that, no specific funds were provided by the state for this population, though we know it's such a smart investment and a required service for preschoolers with disabilities. So the governor is proposing $300 million in ongoing resources instead of one time for preschoolers with disabilities. And based on conversations that I've had with the Department of Finance, these dollars would be restricted to those preschoolers and infants and toddlers with disabilities that these funds would be targeted to. So we don't have the exact language, but based on the methodology that they had used in 2019-20, which also sounds like is at least the starting point for their methodology being proposed, the rate per preschooler with disability would be about $5,900 per preschooler with disabilities. So those would be funds provided based on the district of residence. So going into some of those from those ongoing resources to some one-time resources, we see obviously a focus on mental health. $450 million would be provided through various partnerships through county mental health and school districts in 3 different programs. We need to be getting some more information on this, but they're really recognizing the mental health needs that are exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic and the isolation that many are experiencing. Also, school climate has been a part of the Local Control and Accountability Plan and the LCFF for a number of years. And so what we see here is a $10 million proposal to really have the school climate surveys adapt to the needs under the COVID-19 pandemic. Obviously, the school climate is very different now than it was a year ago, and even years back before, as folks were starting to come up with their school climate surveys. Another sort of repeat that we've seen from years past is the educator professional development, both for in terms of the teacher pipeline, as well as here what we see for actual professional development. Obviously, as you can see across this slide, several different pots of funds would be provided in various professional development areas. I'll focus on the far left orange block because these are the funds that we would expect to go out to all LEAs. The Educator Effectiveness Block Grant, we had one several years back for Common Core when that was rolled out. And so here we have a block grant for professional learning for accelerated learning, re-engagement students, restorative practices, and implicit bias training. So those funds we would expect to be spread across the state. The other resources are more centralized, creating statewide resources or professional development that districts would indirectly benefit from, but we would expect direct benefit for that Educator Effectiveness Block Grant. What we have seen, as you know, the teacher pipeline already was difficult in California, and California has been really experiencing a teacher shortage for a number of years. And again, that appears to be exacerbated by the current pandemic. It makes a lot of sense that if a teacher was thinking about retiring a couple of years from now, they might find that now is the right environment to do so. And so what the state is trying to incentivize here is to get more folks enrolled in teacher preparation programs and really in those high need fields and at schools with high rates of less prepared teachers. So not necessarily fitting the bill for Torrance, but obviously these are high needs around the state. And so you see a continued investment in some programs that are already running, like the Golden State Teacher Grant Program, the Teacher Residency Program, and the Classified School Employee Credentialing Program, that last one, trying to get classified staff who were already interacting with students and obviously love the school environment into the teaching profession. So again, this is some use of one-time funds that the governor is proposing. Obviously, the biggest issue these days is how to reopen schools safely. And you likely heard that even before the governor's budget came out, he had proposed a Safe Schools for All plan, even back late in December. And we're still getting through the details of this plan, and I'll talk in a little bit about the process for these dollars and for the state budget as a whole. But really the focus here of about $2 billion one time, Proposition 98, is to incentivize schools to go back into physical in-person session. You can see a funding formula here based on districts applying for funds, starting at a base rate of $450 if schools are able to put a plan in place to reopen by February, or a lesser amount, $337 if the plan was in place as of March. Now, and we'll go through the details here in a minute, these are not requiring schools to actually go into place and into physical being in February and March, but at least to have the plans ready for when it is safe to do so. I mentioned that it's a base grant. The amount per student increases, again, based on the demographics of your district. much like the LCFF is based on the demographics of your district. So the Safe Schools for All, there are many components to that plan. So I'll just briefly go through each of these components. First is conforming with the latest CDPH guidance, which was just revised last week, and also the current and latest Cal OSHA emergency standards. There is also required, in order to receive these funds, for there to be a collective bargaining agreement or an MOU for that COVID-19 safety plan that would be based on those factors. So this would be a requirement for an agreement with your local labor associations. And then by mid-February or mid-March, to offer in-person instruction. Again, that would be under the best case scenario where it is safe for schools to go back in session, which is not most of the state, but for these plans to be in place. So when it is safe, according to all the different guidance, that those plans are ready and the district is ready to go. Part of that plan is a set cadence of COVID-19 testing, both being offered for students and staff for in-person instruction. And so this would be all laid out based on the current epidemiology and number of cases and percentage of cases there in your local county. And then also verify that students that are in distance learning have access to the appropriate computing devices. And so these are all the things that would be required for a district to apply for those funds. And again, here, this talks some more about, how a district would go into in-person instruction, when in-person instruction would not be allowed. Some of these numbers have actually changed since I sent this presentation late last week. We're now looking, or I should say the state is now looking actually at a case rate of 25 per 100,000. And also some of those, the eligibility dates have changed a little bit. And that just shows you that things are very fluid, even with the proposals that were just put out in the last couple of weeks. So, and again, here, some of these numbers have changed, again, especially that 25 cases per 100,000. But this shows you that both those districts that have both reopened or who have not yet reopened would be able to qualify for those these funds and go back into in-person learning and offer in-person learning when it's safe to do so in order to reopen and utilize those funds. So that was sort of an overview of the governor's proposal for reopening. You may know that the legislature has also introduced a plan in Assembly Bill AB 10. This was put out by a number of Democrats, including your local Assembly member Muratsuchi. This also is compelling and incentivizing, or I should say compelling, districts to go back to in-person learning. There's no funds that is specifically tied to AB 10, but that's not to say that they couldn't incorporate that into a state budget if this is the framework that the legislature and administration agree to. Again, trying to get schools and students back into person rapidly. One of the other proposals that was sort of previewed in the governor's budget on January 8th was $4 billion for state expanded learning time and academic intervention grants. Now, there's not much on this slide because until about 2 o'clock this afternoon, we did not know anything more about what this proposal would be. Some details around the use of funds and the timing of funds are now available. But know again that this is quite fluid, but would be focusing on those students who really research has shown are really suffering in terms of their academics and struggling the most. Low-income students, English learners, foster and homeless youth, students with disabilities. So these dollars would be provided out based again on the LCFF and your local district's sort of proportionate share of the LCFF to be used for extended learning time, academic interventions, professional development around those things. And these dollars would also get pushed out pretty quickly. with the first batch, they'd be hoping to get out in March, and then later on in the current budget year. So that sort of goes a little bit to, in a couple slides here, sort of the next steps and the framework for the state budget. So there were obviously a lot of proposals that I just walked through, but some of the things that are not yet in the proposal or not in the governor's proposal that some districts have been seeking is liability coverage. So concerns about as students and as staff come back, what liability does the district hold if there are cases that come from in-person learning? While we welcomed funding for CalPERS and CalSTRS in last year's budget, there's no additional resources to help bring down those rates, which are worked into your district's budget. And then also we don't see really discretionary dollars that are being provided during good years. Governor Brown would provide unrestricted dollars on a per ADA basis that districts could choose for their own local priorities. And so we don't see that in the governor's proposal. So again, the state budget process, Dr. Stowe laid out sort of a normal year. And as we all know, we're not in a normal year. And so some of these things are being requested for early action and very early action. So that Safe Schools Reopening Plan, the administration actually would like to see go through the legislative process, which usually takes a full 5 to 6 months. Would like to see that happen in the next couple of weeks. The first hearing of it is scheduled on Thursday. There's also some additional actions that the administration would like to see happen in March. Again, so a very accelerated time frame to get resources out to school districts as quickly as possible. So you'll see a lot of attention on that Safe Schools Reopening Plan because that is what the administration wants to get done as soon as possible. And then sort of the rest of the budget, like deferrals, cost of living adjustments, special education, you'd see those more on the normal budget timeframe. So discussed through the spring, a change in May based on changing economics, based on changing stakeholder input, and then final adoption of the state budget by mid-June. So we know that this is anything but a normal year. So we are here to provide you with as much information as we can as quickly as possible. And if there's anything that we don't know today, we hope to learn over the next several weeks and continue to provide that information to Torrance Unified so you can make the best decisions possible for your local district. So with that, I'll be happy to conclude and turn it back over to you.
Great, thank you very much for your presentation, Ms. Underwood. Now, does staff or any of my colleagues have any questions for Ms. Underwood? You have to speak up. I can't see everybody right now.
Yes, I did have a question. So I know that there were concerns about districts that are not safe to open, and what it would mean in terms of you may have a plan in place to reopen for February, but if the case count in your area does not allow for it, does that mean that the access to those funds are just not going to happen? And then also there were conversations about the cost of testing for all students and staff and in-person learning, and whether that was addressed at all in the most recent updates.
Yeah, great questions. And those are definitely the concerns that folks are having as the proposal is rolled out. So districts and schools that can't currently go into session because of the local case rate, if they're in deep purple, if they don't meet the requirements to reopen or the guidance to reopen, they can still apply for those funds. So what is required is to have a plan in place locally, so when it is safe to reopen, when the guidance does say reopen, they're ready to go within a matter of days, instead of starting the process once the green light once given the green light that it's safe, the incentive here that the governor is putting forward is to have the plan in place as soon as possible. So as soon as a school is able to reopen, they will. And by that token, districts can use those funds over a longer period of time. They could use it for the entire calendar year. So even if they aren't able to go back into session during this academic year, they can use those dollars at the beginning of the next academic year. You also touched on testing. That is definitely a concern. How expensive they are, whether testing sites have the capacity to take all those tests and process all those tests. The folks that I've talked to, districts that I've heard from that are already doing those tests because they were able to utilize the waiver and go back into session. They've talked with their local testing sites, and if they had to increase to what the administration is looking for, what the guidance say, the testing sites would just be overwhelmed. So that's definitely something that needs to be worked out, is there really the capacity to conduct all those tests once folks do get back to in-person learning? So great questions that lots of districts have and the legislature has as well.
Just a follow-up to the testing. So for those elements that are outside of our control, in our plan, would we have to demonstrate that we could provide testing for everyone, regardless of sort of our control over the situation, to have access to the funds, or is demonstration of effort sufficient?
Yeah, and I'd say that the districts would need to provide and show that they're able to do that. And you're right, the resources and the capacity and the bandwidth would be very difficult to meet that requirement.
Vice President Han?
Just a quick question. Thank you so much for your presentation. Again, just the idea, when you say open up schools, what does that mean? Does it mean K through 5? Is it K through 2? Is it, I don't know what that number is.
Yes, and it would be a phased in approach. So starting with TK, I think it's TK through 2, and then grade 2 up to grade 5 or 6. So it would be phased in, and it is to start with the youngest students first, and then within a month have the older students also able to go back in. Now, students wouldn't have to choose to, but they would need to be offered instruction.
Anyone else have any questions? Well, we got Miss Underwood here. Okay, I don't see anyone. Thank you so much, Miss Underwood. You always give such great presentations, and thank you for keeping us abreast of what's going on in Sacramento.
Yes, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Good night.
Good night. Thank you. Okay, we're now moving on to item number 8.2, report by student representative and recognition. We have Sophia Rodriguez here from North High School. Take it away, Sophia.
Okay, hello everyone. So kind of anticlimactic. We don't really have much going on at North because we're currently in finals. However, before winter break, we did have a winter spirit week, including a class competition escape room, as well as a toy drive, and our choir had a video winter concert, and currently we are planning to move forward with our multicultural week.
Great, thank you. Secondary School Director, Dr. Egan, do you have a presentation?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Liu, and I want to thank and congratulate Sophia on her term with us here as the student representative for the board. I have something that I'll be sending to you at your home tomorrow, along with your nameplate that you would have had in front of you when you would have been sitting right next to me in person at the board meeting. So, but this is on behalf of the school board, and with the camera, it's backwards so we could test your reading skills. But it's a certificate of appreciation for your work here with us. And so I, on behalf of cabinet and Superintendent, I want to thank you for that. And Mrs. Liu, if you have anything else you would like to add, feel free.
Sure. Thank you so much for preparing that certificate. It's very special. And Ms. Rodriguez, Sophia, it's been an unusual circumstance that you have to attend the board meetings, going on Zoom, but you've done very well. We hope that you had a good experience here. And I believe you're a senior at North High. How are your college? I mean, you're spending a lot of your time and energy into our meetings when it's the same time as when you would be applying for colleges. So extra appreciation there for this. What schools are you thinking of? I guess the application is done now. So what schools are you thinking and hoping to go to?
I just applied to my local Cal States and UCs like UCI and UCLA. So yeah.
That sounds wonderful.
Thank you.
Best of luck. And do any of my colleagues want to say a few words to Ms. Sophia Rodriguez? Ms. Park, unmute yourself first.
Yes, hi. As a fellow North High, well, I'm quite a few years ahead. I'm just so thankful for your service, and just also wanted to state how important it was for me to be able to get involved in my community during high school with the Torrance Youth Council, and for you joining us on the school board as a student representative. And I really hope that you will continue to represent young people's perspectives and voices at these decision-making forums. So really hope that this is just the beginning of you continuing to advocate for your peers. So thank you very much.
Very well said, Ms. Park. Thank you. So looks like we're good now for item 8.2. Moving on, we are on to item 8.3, Interim Superintendent's Report. Dr. Stowe?
Thank you, President Liu and board members. Wanted to just talk a little bit tonight about what we've done since our last meeting, which was a week ago Saturday. The first Saturday meeting that I spoke with Dr. Mannon, even in his 20+ year tenure of being a superintendent, never had a Saturday meeting. So commend all of you, cabinet, and the board for the commitment to this district in what continues to be a challenging time. I first and foremost want to again, and take every opportunity that I can, to recognize our staff, teachers, our classified staff, counselors, speech language pathologists, nurses, health clerks, our administrators. I mean, everyone is doing everything that they can to support what we are doing for our students as this pandemic continues. And so TUSD continues to do great things, and I'm so thankful for everyone and their work. Since the special board meeting on January 9th, and at the strong recommendation of the LA County Department of Public Health, we have taken steps to significantly reduce the number of students and staff on campuses, and I wanted to let you know that. At the elementary school level, we reduced the number of staff on campus by 24%, and the number of students on campus by 83%. Obviously, our TKK and first grade students, as well as a number of the learning cohorts were continued into distance learning. At the secondary level, we had a reduction in staff by 25% and a reduction in students by 28%. Again, these are our learning cohorts and a number of our special ed programs. This does not include the athletic conditioning, which would take care of another 1,500 or so students that are on campuses throughout the week. And in a call last week, the Department of Public Health stated that they are not intending to extend the strong recommendation. And so we are continuing our planning at the direction of the board to bring our TK and K and first grade students back on February 1st. as we await any additional information that may come from the DPH. But again, they stated that they do not intend to extend the recommendation that they asked us to put in place through the month of January. Now, vaccinations is a topic that I know is of great interest. I'm happy to announce to the board that just today, Dr. Butler and working with the city of Torrance, the city through the fire department has agreed to be our vaccination partner. And when the vaccine becomes available to school workers in Tier 1B, we want to control the process. And this is one way that, you know, we're grateful to live in a community that we is looking to do things for each other that are mutually beneficial. And so we are looking forward to working with the city and developing plans for our employees who may be able to get the vaccine as soon as early February. And so we're waiting on information from the DPH as to when that comes, and we will proceed there, and that will be at no cost to us. Which will be great because the city believes that they can be reimbursed for any of their expenses through state and or federal dollars. So we look forward to that. Another element of our discussion on the 9th was the PSAT. This is the practice SAT exam that customarily for the last 7 years or so, we've given to all of our high school juniors, our 11th graders on a school day, which really increases the participation. It allows our students to get feedback on their readiness for the SAT and begin to think about that whole college process. And so while the DPH still currently allows this, we are planning to, on Tuesday, the 26th, have students at each of our high schools voluntarily participate in the PSAT following DPH guidelines. And so in addition to what you know, as far as the guidelines of no more than 12 students in a class of with 2 adults, 2 teachers and or adult proctors, we're taking some additional precautions and we're happy to discuss that with the board tonight. We're reducing the number of students in a classroom to 10 or fewer with an adult proctor where possible. For classrooms that are going to have 12 students, we will utilize our larger spaces. So gyms, cafeterias, multi-purpose room, possibly the auditoriums, if needed, the stage area. And so that way we have additional spacing and not limited to the 6 feet. Obviously, students will all be wearing masks. We will also add HEPA filtration, HEPA filters to all of those areas that are being tested, just as we have done at the elementary school for our students in class. And we will utilize multiple points of entry to prevent possible student congregation upon arrival. And we also intend to do temperature checks for our students. And so I know Dr. Egan and Dr. Butler and the principals and site supervisors are working to ensure that they secure the spaces on campus. Some schools have roughly about 100 students, while others are up to about 200. But again, regardless of the number of students total coming on campus voluntarily, they will be limited as far as the number of students in a classroom. So those are my updates. I also do, before I turn it back to you, President Liu, I would like to say a few words because I don't believe that the board will on item 12.7 that's on tonight's agenda. This is a resolution that is asking for your approval. And this item is to proclaim January 2021 as School Board Recognition Month. We got this from CSBA and I felt it very appropriate to put it on. Being a board member, as you know, is not an easy job. My grandfather actually was a school board member in Michigan for 24 years. And I remember growing up hearing stories about the endless 24/7 work in this quote unquote volunteer job. And I know you do the same. You spend many hours away from your families. Oftentimes, and I'll point out over the holidays, right? New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, we were communicating with regard to things. And so you spend time away from your families dealing with important issues as it relates to district business. And especially in this past 10 months, it's been certainly a trying time. So I encourage everyone to read this resolution in its entirety. I believe it paints a very clear picture of the tremendous responsibility placed on school board members. So to you and all board members who have served TUSD, Mrs. Reagans and Mr. Lee, who recently came off, they were here through much of it. I thank you on behalf of the staff, the students, parents, and the community. Your leadership and work in creating an educational system that meets the needs of our students is benefiting Torrance tremendously and will continue to do so. So with that, I turn it back to you, President Liu and board, for any questions on any of these updates. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Stowe. That's very much appreciated, I'm sure. Do any of my colleagues have any questions for staff in regards to his report? Okay, seeing none, we can move on to item number 9, oral communications for unscheduled hearings.
Ms. Park, did you have a question?
I just wanted to confirm that the PSAT is completely voluntary for all of the students and also the staff who will be proctoring. So it's just for those who feel comfortable doing so, and like, what are the opportunities if people change their minds to, if they decide that they are no longer comfortable, what would their options be?
So we do have contingency plans on staff. Again, it was voluntary for staff to step up and do that at those respective schools. We've got others, district administrators and or site admin or substitutes and others that are on at the ready to step in at the last minute should we need additional adult proctors. And students, if students so choose and they don't want to go, obviously we're only giving it to roughly between 20 and 40% of our student population when it would otherwise have been 100. Students can take the regular SAT as a qualifier for the National Merit Scholarship qualifying test, which is one of the reasons why we want to give this assessment to everyone, is to help identify more students for the National Merit Program. And so students can utilize the regular SAT as a qualifier for National Merit, but they also have the option to come to campus and multiple options. As a parent of an 11th grader, I know there were weekly emails for a time of asking if you want to come and take the test, and so there was also an option recently to opt out should a student have already wanted to selected to go on to campus, that they can they could have opted out as well, and they still can.
That's great. Thank you, Ms. Park and Dr. Stowe, for your question and answer. Is there anyone else? Okay, great. We will move on to item number 9, oral communications for unscheduled hearings, which are non-agenda items. The Board of Education welcomes input from the public in compliance with Governor Newsom's Executive Order N2520 in response to the ongoing COVID-19 outbreak. The district will conduct the Board of Education's regular meeting as a teleconference. Public comments to non-agenda items may address only items that are within the subject matter of the board. Time allotted for such comments is limited to 3 minutes per comment. Total time allotted for public input on non-agenda items is limited to 30 minutes. School board clerk Dr. Gerson will be timing the 3 minutes. Complaints against employees and students will normally be heard in closed session, and the district's complaint procedure should be followed before discussion with the board. The board may disconnect disruptive individuals from the teleconference if necessary. If any person who willfully disturbs any public school meeting is guilty of a misdemeanor. Dr. Stowe, do we have any orals?
I believe we have one, Mr. Mara, Robert Gregory, but I'm not sure that I see his name on the attendee list. Do you see it?
No, he was on earlier, but it's disconnected, so he's no longer here in the meeting. So there's no one else. That was the only submission that we had.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mr. Mara. We will move on to item number 10, discussion action items. 10.1, instructions to the public. Speakers wishing to address the board on agenda topics must complete the appropriate submission form on the district website, www.TUSD.org. Speakers are permitted 3 minutes per topic, and the total time granted for public input shall also be limited to 30 minutes per topic. The board procedures require that public comments to the board comply with certain procedures, including items 3 to 5 listed in oral communications. Item number 10.2, approval of proposed board policy update, October 2020 revisions, first reading. Dr. Stowe?
Ms. Liu, on this, we do have no board or public comment again, and so if the board does have the option to waive the second reading and approve these at tonight's meeting, should such a motion be made.
Move that we waive the second reading.
Second.
Okay, and Anna, you want to just move, you want to approve the agenda and waive the second reading, correct? Because we need an approval of it too. Yes, I see nodding. Okay, so Dr. Gerson made the motion, Mr. Han made the second. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 Aye. I see all 5 of us are in favor, so the motion to adopt and waive second reading is passed. Next item is item number 11, consent agenda. Approval of consent agenda as a whole. All matters listed on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted with one vote. There's no discussion of consent calendar items unless members of the governing board, public, or staff request to remove it from the consent calendar for separate action. Are there any items that my colleagues might want to pull?
I make a motion to accept all consent items.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Vice President Han.
I second that motion.
Thank you, Dr. Gerson. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 Okay. I see all raise their hands and okay, great. We will, the motion's passed. We will, let's see, where are we? Item number 19, information for the public and for within our school district, our board calendar, revisions to administrative regulations and exhibits, and the William reporting requirements. Item number 20.1, report from board representative to the Southern California Regional Occupational Center, South Rock. Vice President Han, do you have any comments?
No, we have our meeting this week, our board meeting this week. So I will give an update on our next meeting.
Yes, we keep missing it. This meeting's always happened to, it seems like it's always happening before this Southern California Rock meeting. But thank you very much for being our representative on that. Item number 20.2, other comments from the board. If you have any comments, feel free to raise your hand. Dr. Mohammed, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, President Liu. Just wanted to thank Dr. Stowe for providing the update. That was very helpful. So thank you for sharing that. And also, staff for working with the city and the fire department regarding the vaccination. I really appreciate the proactiveness. I think it's really important. And so thank you so much for doing that and coordinating some of those logistics. Also, I just learned today that, thank you, Dr. Stowe, for sharing, that we have a new personnel commissioner on the personnel commission for our merit system, since we are a merit district. So I'd just like to congratulate our former board member, Mark Steffen, on his appointment to fill the vacant personnel commission spot. So congratulations, and thank you so much. Back to you, President Liu.
Great, thank you, Dr. Muhammad, and congratulations out there for Mr. Mark Steffen. Fantastic choice, if you're even on the video here. Any other comments from anybody? Mr. Han?
I just want to make a quick comment. I want to say thank you to Chick-fil-A, Mr. Revelo at Chick-fil-A, for making a donation for 250. We're still waiting for the other Chick-fil-A's hopefully to come through as well. But again, I want to say thank you just for your generosity and your support for our teachers. And for all our teachers out there, again, thank you. Hang in there. We appreciate all that you guys are doing.
Great, thank you, Vice President Han. All right, item number 21, we will now adjourn to a closed session in memory of retired principal William Letunich, retired teacher Barney Barker, retired teacher Nancy Jones, high school site supervisor Susanna Beasley, and retired system support specialist Harriet Flick. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Great, thank you. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 Motion passes. I will see you all in closed session now.
Right. Remember, Ms. Liu, we're going to adjourn to closed session and then we'll come back into open session to finalize the meeting whenever we're done.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Good night to all the other people there. Bye.